Hey folks, and welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to be doing just a quick Stage 3 recap, just hitting some of the big storylines that we saw come out of Stage 3 as we're about to hit the playoffs for the StarLadder Budapest Major to send off 2025, so to speak. And with that said, before I get into it, folks, if you have not already, please do subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate that. Also, leave a like, leave a comment. Really just trying to grow the channel. We've already blown past the 5,000 subscriber goal that I had set for the end of this year, but we're just looking to keep the channel growing, so I would really appreciate it if you would help that continue. Also, I'm going to give a shout out to a buddy of mine in this video so that you go subscribe to his channel, and that is Lionhearts. I will throw his information on screen. At the time of me recording this video, he is less than 50 people away from having 10,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel. He's a guy I've collaborated on some content with. He is a grinder. The dude's put out well over 200 videos this year, doing pretty much daily recaps for all of the major tournaments on the CS2 circuit, as well as some other content. So definitely go give him a subscribe. He's a really cool dude, puts out great content. And like I said, as I'm recording this, he's only 50 away from 10,000. By the time you see this, maybe he's already hit that goal. So go give him a congrats if that's the case. But yeah, just go show him support if you don't mind. And very quickly before I recap Stage 3, I just want to say that for the playoffs, I won't be doing just a traditional playoff pick'em video. What I'm going to do is just do a playoff preview video for every single quarterfinals match we know is going to happen. So I'll be going one by one for all 4 quarterfinals matches, and I will be previewing all 8 teams, as well as just the head-to-head matchups that will be taking place in the quarterfinals. So I'll be doing that kind of in lieu of a normal playoff pick'em video. As of now, the playoff pick'ems aren't even unlocked when I'm recording this. So yeah, I just kind of want to do a video for every single playoff match, really go in depth, and that helps me spread out the content as well too, because otherwise I'd have a freaking hour-long playoff preview video for the playoff pick'ems, whereas then I can kind of take each match, focus on 2 teams at a time, focus on 1 match at a time, and kind of condense things down a little bit. And I think that's just kind of a better way to do things. It's what I've done the last couple of majors. It's worked out pretty well, and so be on the lookout for that as far as pick'ems go. But speaking of pick'ems, Stage 3, we lit it up, folks. We went 7 out of 10 on this one, which means I went 5 out of 10 on Stage 2 and 4 out of 10 on Stage 1, with literally this BO3 right here being the only thing that is keeping me away from still being in the running for Diamond. No, I'm not bitter at all, I promise. So going to Stage 3, yeah, I was able to nail 7 here. I was able to get the 3-0s exactly correct with Spirit and Furia. Went wrong on 0-3s. I had Imperial and Passion UA. I thought they were the 2 weakest teams in the group. And ultimately, these teams did wind up struggling. I mean, Imperial goes 1-3, so they didn't do much better than the 0-3 that I had them at. And then Passion UA actually was able to, you know, get the win over Liquid, get the win over Imperial, and actually make it into the final day, but ultimately lost to FaZe. So did a lot better than I expected, actually. Again, nailed these 2 right on the dot. And I mean, I got all of these right except for, which one did I get wrong, actually? Oh yeah, Mongolz got through and G2 didn't. That's obviously the only miss that I had. Which, shout out to Mongolz one time for being able to make it through. We'll talk about that in a second. But then it was G2 versus Falcons for the final spot, which is really unfortunate. Just one of the many examples of why best of ones are terrible for the major, why the seeding system's terrible for the major. The fact that this was a 2-2 match between 2 top 10 ranked teams in the world, all because, you know, Falcons slipped in a BO1 against Bait early on, and then obviously, you know, G2 lost their best of 3 to Furia, the best team in the world, and so that kind of propels them downward. Like, it's just a wacky system. We could fix the whole major with 2 to 3 extra days, basically, depending on how you want to do it, and get rid of best of ones forever. So Valve, please, can we fucking do that? I know the best of 5 grand final edition for the next major, or this major actually, is really cool, but that took 0 effort. You're adding a couple of extra hours to your final day. That's really not that much of a push. So why don't we actually do some real work and get rid of best of ones and make majors the best tournament possible? Thank you so very much. But without further ado, let's kind of hit some of the key storylines that we've gotten past the pick, and I've gloated a little bit about how amazing and how much ball knowledge I have. So to just hit the key storylines really quickly, we'll start with the success, and of course that was Spirit and Furia going 3-0. Now, obviously Furia was a favorite to go 3-0, same with a team like Vitality, the top 2 teams in the world, but you never really know what's going to happen in a BO1, especially with them playing Na'Vi first, who were hot off of going 3-0 in the previous stage, and they're a decent team, and you never know what could happen in a BO1, but Furia, able to get the job done. They were able to beat Na'Vi on Nuke, they were able to get an easier game against Imperial on DusT 2, to be fair, and they did beat G2 2-0, so really convincing win over a solid team that did make it all the way to the final day of the group stage and has generally been a top 10 ranked team for the last several months, including having a tournament victory. So basically Furia took care of business and solidifies themselves as still the favorite to win the whole thing. I mean, they came in as number 1 ranked team, you know, having won 3 tournaments in a row, winning 4 of their last 5 events they have participated in. They're just been on fire with this new international roster. They're clicking on, you know, all fronts. Just everyone's playing well. Everyone's doing their job. Map pool looks insane. They're beating the best teams in the world pretty regularly. I think the only team that has a head-to-head advantage over them technically is Mousesports. And yeah, they just continue to ride that into the playoffs. They will still be your favorite to win the whole thing when it's all said and done. Even how the bracket has been drawn up, there is a chance that they should make it all the way to the grand final, actually. I mean, definitely could do it. And depending on who they meet there, they could win the whole damn thing. And what a story that would be. So yeah, they've locked in. Now at Spirit, they're a little bit more interesting because they were a team that was certainly a top 5 team in the world pretty much all year. They even started off the season hot with a couple of wins this season, including winning a prestige event in Cologne. And, you know, they even were able to win events with Zwei, even though Zwei was the new addition to the team and wasn't necessarily playing that well. Now, since they've also done the addition of Tanir to kind of add things to the puzzle, they did struggle their last few events. You know, they were falling outside of that top 5 position we used to know them for so consistently. But what we saw at this major was that you got, you know, Tonk and Shiro absolutely crushing it per usual. Chopper's even had a couple of good games. You know, Tanir's been decent in a couple of games at least. And so maybe if he can level up just a little bit more, that'll give them like a true 3rd star player they can rely upon. But I thought it was funny that Donk had this interview where he was just like, yeah, I'm focused a little bit more on being a team player, not just getting kills, not being a star. And then he proceeds to drop like fucking ridiculous numbers the first couple of BO1s. And they had one of the harder paths. I mean, yeah, you know, this was kind of a lull against Team Liquid, who massively underperformed, but FaZe had been kind of on fire the last stage and did well this stage. They did make it to the playoffs indeed. And then they beat Mousesports 2-1, which is another top 5 team in the world. So really well done for Spirit. Certainly makes them look in a little bit better position going into the playoffs, because while I think most of us figured they would make playoffs, I think there was this hint of doubt about Spirit, because unlike Furia, who's been rocking all season, and Vitality, who's been consistently placing top 4 every event, and Mouse, who's pretty much near that, outside of the Mongolz Sinzu situation, you know, Spirit was one of the other teams that we had some concerns about, and getting a confident BO3 win over Mousesports and, you know, getting a couple of solid BO1 looks, I think does wonders for them going into the playoffs. Now, they do have a tough playoff bracket ahead of them, and we'll talk about that in the playoff preview videos I'm going to do that are going to be coming out very soon, but yeah, tip your hat to them. Then, look, I mean, Mouse and Vitality go 3-1. Nothing too shocking here. These are 2 other top 4 teams in the world. They were 2 other teams that could have gone 3-0. You know, with Mousesports, they just lost the series to Spirit, but then they got the win over Falcons, which is actually a little bit of revenge because Falcons had been beating them head-to-head lately. So this was actually a really nice win for them, and looking in good form and looking like they always do in group stages. Now it's just about how will they look actually in playoff matches, and particularly how will they look in a semifinal, I think, is really kind of the gauge for them, because that's kind of the spot they find themselves in quite often. Then Vitality, again, we knew that they're still, you know, number 2 team in the world behind Furia, basically, not that far removed from being the best team in the world. And yeah, had a really good run here after that fumble to FaZe on Nuke. They got through really no trouble, dominated the other 3 games that they played. And so that's really it. Now, the big story is actually Mongolz going 3-1, because this is a team that I think we didn't have a lot of expectations for, if we're honest, after losing Sinzu. Even their last few tournaments leading into this one didn't look so hot. But in this time off between, you know, when they were playing their last couple of tournaments and when they entered this major, they've used it pretty well, it seems like. In some cases, Controls is playing 1-for-1 for Sinzu, but in other cases, you've seen Blitz take over Sinzu's roles, and Controls kind of falling into some of Blitz's spots, and they've been kind of just tinkering around with things a little bit, and Controls actually had a fucking excellent major so far. I don't know if he'll keep up that form, if we're honest. It would be impressive if he did, but the fact that he was doing it against some very skilled players on Liquid, FaZe, and G2 was certainly nothing to scoff at. Blitz obviously playing up to his level, being the fragging IGL we all know him for. 910 doing decent, Mizzino doing decent, Techno playing his roles well and entering okay when he's been called upon to do that. And so, yeah, to see them be able to 2-0 G2 and beat FaZe and beat Liquid, I mean, despite Liquid having their struggles, and, we could kind of almost call it Liquid losing to them, but it also is just as much Mongolz doing well enough to beat these teams. It's not just the other teams faltering to them or something like that. They deserve a lot of credit. A lot of credit has to go to Mara and Blitz and the leadership system of this team to, take what has been a crippling loss, losing Sinzu, your star player, star aggressive rifler, plays a lot of important roles for this team. He was finally leveling up in bigger matches and playoff appearances compared to the drop-offs he used to have in those situations. And, they were a top 5 team in the world for the majority of this season, and even dating back to when they made the grand finals last season at Austin and some of the stuff they were doing even prior to that. I mean, they were looking like a top 5 team for the majority of the year, actually. And unfortunately, when Sinzu left, we thought that they were going to slip down the totem pole, and maybe a team like a G2 or a Na'Vi or some of these other squads might look to kind of jump past them and start contending for a top 5 spot in their own right. I mean, you kind of have Spirit, Furia, Mouse, Vitality, and Falcons, I think, kind of in the top 5 now. But if you're looking at that number 6 spot, Mongolz was on the outside looking in, so to speak, I think, in a lot of people's eyes. And so this was a pretty convincing run. I don't know what they'll be able to do in the playoffs. I mean, I think they're playing Vitality in the quarterfinals, so that is going to be a rough first test and likely where their tournament ends. But even if that is the case, the fact that they were able to get to the playoffs despite everything that they've been going through is pretty incredible stuff. Then for the final teams here, FaZe are able to make it to the playoffs, having to play all 3 stages of the tournament. They are, in fact, the only team that will make the playoffs that have played every single stage this tournament. Now, obviously, stage 1 was a fucking stinker, considering, who they played against and the results that they got. I mean, barely getting past Red Canids and Fluxo, but then they 3-0'd stage 2, so really bouncing back. And in this stage, they actually get a BO1 win over Vitality. And yeah, they lose to Spirit and Mongol, some of the tougher teams in this group, but then they get the 2-0 over 3D Max, and they get the 2-0 over Passion UA. Some of the weaker teams, yeah, sure, but still, if you would have asked most people before this major started if FaZe would make the playoffs, considering how poor their season has been, it would have been probably a resounding fuck no from virtually everyone. So the fact that FaZe got up to their bullshit again and looked magical enough to make the playoffs, having a really good stage 2 and a pretty solid stage 3, is actually just an incredible flip of form. Twist and Frozen continue to be the stars of this team, but this stage, we got to see Jacob really come alive and actually start showing you some of the potential that people have been hoping we'd see when he first got there. He's been a little bit of a late bloomer. Obviously, he's, had to change the level of competition he's playing against. He's had to, change some roles from what he used to do on Apogee. So he's had a lot of hurdles in front of him, but he has fucking started really lighting it up, and it's giving this team enough firepower to be very dangerous alongside Kerrigan's leadership. I think their map pool is still very iffy. I think their overall play is still kind of iffy. I think the playoffs are still going to be very tough for them. But again, the fact that somehow FaZe keeps finding ways to make major playoff runs despite having poor seasons is just incredible. It's like some of their guys leveled up at just the right time during the break between stages and stuff like that to get them to this point. So tip your hat to them no matter what happens. The fact that they were able to do this is a great step up in play from what they were doing all season. It also maybe gives you a little bit of hope in the future of this team. Like if Kerrigan decides to stick around as an in-game leader, you keep Twist and Frozen locked in as kind of your star riflers. If Jacob continues to develop, like all of a sudden you got something to work with there. I think they still need to change outputs. I still think Brokey ain't it long term. I think some people are trying to turn that narrative around because Brokey did actually play pretty well in some games this stage, but it's like I've just seen the story a couple of too many times, and I think Brokey has been too inconsistent and mostly bad the majority of this year and even a lot of last year other than the Shanghai Major. So I do think if FaZe want to have true long-term aspirations after this major, they need to replace Brokey, and they need to hope to God that they can retain Frozen and he doesn't wind up going to a different team, which has been rumored in the past. But still, tip your hat to them. They've done well. Na'Vi gets through. Props to them. I know that they've been a little shaky here and there. They've also had some successes here and there as well with this, transition with Makaze coming onto the team. But yeah, Wonderful's had a hell of a major. Bit and Ema are playing pretty well also. Makaze still has his moments. He's still kind of a wild card. He's still kind of growing as a player. But yeah, I mean, they get their wins over Paravision. They're able to get the 2 over Bait. Their losses were the two best teams in the world in Furia and Vitality, so you can't knock them too fucking hard. They actually played a great stage. They are certainly deserving of being in the playoffs. I'm not sure how far they'll make it, but hey, they got themselves there, and that is certainly worth applause. And then Falcons, hey, they grinded their way here. I mean, they lost their opening BO1. You start to get concerned if we're going to see a repeat of Blast Austin. Doesn't happen. They get their shit together in the next couple of best of ones. Yes, against weaker teams. Then they have a tight series against Mousesports. They lose in 3 maps. And then they have a tight series against G2 that they win in 3 maps. This is after losing Ancient, a map that used to be their map. They won it like 13 times in a row before this major. I think they had won every game they had played with Kiyosuke. It starts to falter them against Bait and then against G2 to open this series. But then they fucking grind back on Inferno, a map that's given them struggles against G2. And they were able to get the win on DusT 2 as well. And Muncie, a guy we were concerned about, because he had a slow start to this major, just like had happened at Austin, just happened at Cologne and Katowice, where he's had those issues at prestige events. He fucking had some massive impact on that CT side DusT 2 to help them get across the line, getting some opening picks with the op, and also looked really good on Inferno as well. So to see him come alive the last couple of maps of this group stage and put himself in form going into the playoffs is certainly good news, because Nico's been playing well, Kiyosuke's been doing his fucking job, Kixon's usually been doing his job as a fragger, and Tessus is all right. Again, I don't think you expect a lot from him. He's making a lot of sacrifices on this team compared to the roles he used to play in his past, but they're starting to really figure it out, and I feel like Falcons has leveled up every event they've played this season. They've become a consistent top 5 team. They're starting to threaten to make semis and finals each event that they play. If they could just get past losing some of the critical swing rounds, anti-ecos or rounds that would reset their economy, just like critical rounds, if they can just kind of pave over those, I'm liking the overall view of how they play the game. I think the macro game they have actually looks pretty good. It's just sometimes they lose things in the finer details in the mid to late round, but that just comes with reps and experience with Kiyosuke and with these guys, even Nico playing new roles and things of that nature. So yeah, I am, pretty high on what Falcons did. I know it was 3-2, but I mean, they had a loss to Mousesports, and they had a tight game. They had the toughest opponent in the 2-2 game of anyone, and they got the job done. And this is a huge step up from Blast Austin, and it continues kind of the trajectory we've seen out of them this season, where they've been, again, a consistent top 5 team. So we pretty much got the best playoffs teams you could hope for. The only thing you could argue about is it would have been cool to see G2 in the playoffs instead of maybe Mongolz, but the Mongol story is also really cool. But if G2 could have gotten in over a Mongolz or a FaZe, maybe that would be a more deserving thing, just based on seasonal averages, I guess you could say. But all in all, we have a pretty fucking rock-solid playoffs. As far as teams that didn't make it to the playoffs, I mean, the only one that's truly disappointing, I think, is G2. But it's a tough draw when you have to play Furia and Falcons in the BO3s to get there. After winning your opening 2 best of ones, your reward is Furia and Mongolz and Falcons. Maybe you argue they should have been able to beat Mongolz despite Mongolz being without Senzu. But hey, they got rocked, and tip your hat to Mongolz for playing a hell of a group. We already talked about that, and they had a very tight series against Falcons. I think they still can have their heads up, and they certainly look like they're moving in the right direction. The Saul Hunter brain trust, Hunter being an IGL, that seems to be panning out. We did see a good play from Heavy God at times. Mattis still looks solid. I think Malbs, you could still try to get him, I think, a little bit more activated for next year. Sun Pius, I know, was apparently dealing with like an ear infection and had to have like a procedure done the night before this Falcons game. I think there's still some things to work on, but bright future ahead. Hey, I think Bait's run this major through all the different stages to get this close to playoffs, just, losing to Navi, but getting a BO1 win over, Falcons. They had to play 2 really good teams in Mouse and Vitality. They got the 2 overpaying they're supposed to get. I actually thought Bait did pretty well this major, all considered as well, honestly. So tip your hat to them. These are 2 teams that didn't make playoffs, but hey, they did a pretty fucking good job otherwise. Tip your hat to Passion UA as well. Being able to beat Liquid. The Imperial win's not going to give them too much credit, and yeah, they did lose to FaZe for a chance at playoffs, but this is still a step up from where they were at last major for the core of this team. So all right there. Imperial, I mean, they did have a weak as fuck schedule the first couple of stages, and it finally caught up to them where they had to play some tough teams this stage, but they still got further than probably a lot of people expected, and so they still should be commended. 3D Max, what do you fucking know? It's exactly what I said. 9th to 14th place is where they fucking live, and they've done it yet again, so I really can't say too much about that one. I just think they lack firepower, unfortunately. I mean, that's the thing. When you compare them to almost every other top 15 team in the world, all the other teams you can think of have star players. They don't. You know, basically they are built of a roster of a bunch of guys that you would want to be your third or fourth best player on your team. They just don't have that number one, number two guy that you would really need to threaten some of the elite teams in the world. And so this is where they're going to be stuck, unfortunately, probably for the foreseeable future. I don't know what would change things for them. Pain, it is what it is. They've been struggling all season and really a lot this year just in general, so I'm not too surprised to see this. I'd love to see Pain make some changes going into next year as kind of like a final thought on them. I think Dicusses and NQZ are a couple of good pieces to build around. I think DGT has done his role pretty well. I think if you keep that core for VRS purposes and you're able to, you know, potentially, I mean, definitely replace Davideus at the very least, but I even think for, you know, Snow, his inconsistencies, like he's still a young guy, maybe there's still room for him to grow and figure himself out, and they figure out how to use him better. But man, just imagine a world where you have Dicusses, you have NQZ. That's probably the best IGL and Opera you're going to get if you're staying full Brazilian, or mostly, I mean, this team's not full Brazilian. They have 2 South American players on the team, but that aren't Brazilian, and Davideus and DGT. But, you know, they haven't gone the total international route either, like a Furia and a Made in Brazil has tried to do. So yeah, imagine a world where on this team you somehow are able to get your hands on someone like Insani. You know, maybe you get your hands on a Lotto, you know, just find a way. I mean, I know people would love to see Legacy just keep their full 5 and keep building because they're at a decent spot. But let's say we don't touch any Legacy guys and they do keep their full 5 and they stay the true full Brazilian team and they continue to try to push for like a, you know, top 10 spot in the world or certainly top 15. Again, give Pain Insani, bro. Like this Made in Brazil thing, I'm over it. I'm so over it. Get Insani off of Made in Brazil. Get him on Pain to be their entry fragger next to Dicusses and NQZ. DGT still like your passive role player. Then Snow can just be like kind of a hybrid or something. I don't know. And that would be such a fucking fire team. So that's what I'd love to see. I think they have to at least make one change, if not two. At this point, I think they're just kind of stuck until they make those changes and then, you know, work through those. Liquid, I made a whole video about Liquid if you haven't seen that already, where I talked about how they failed. They just look terrible as a team. I mean, I don't really know what else to say. Yeah, they've only been playing together for 2 months. Maybe that gives you some outs, but the fact that they did have a month to prepare for this major, and this is what we saw. Yes, they played some tougher teams in Spirit and Mongolz, no doubt, but this 0-2 to Passion UA is fucking unforgivable, and just the way that they look playing Counter-Strike is fucking terrible. I mean, they look so uncoordinated. They do not look on the same page. Their spacing is bad. Their trading efficiency is bad. Complementary utility seems non-existent a lot of the time. Shuhei's just running in and dying with no one trading him or no one even nearby to help him. I mean, he ints like fucking no other way too often. I feel like he tries to be a star player. He thinks he's the fucking main character or something like that. No, you're supposed to be the leader of this team. You're supposed to be setting up your star players like Elysian Nerds. They need to figure some shit out. I don't know. You know, maybe Liquid just feels like they've only been together for 2 months and so they won't make any roster changes at all. But if it were me, I really do feel like Liquid probably needs to be in the market for a new Opper because as high as Ultimate's highs are, his floor is just way too low. He's been way too inconsistent. A better Opper, I think, would help them out and help stabilize the team a little bit, in my opinion. And look, I'm Shuhei's running out of fucking time for me. If he keeps playing like the way that he's been playing, where he just keeps fucking running in and dying and not having anyone behind him to trade, or, you know, just kind of inting the way that he has been, and just the overall team not looking well run, like they don't play good Counter-Strike together, so he obviously has to take some of that. Yeah, he can't micromanage everybody, but part of your job is to be, you know, a guy who organizes the mid and late rounds, and I'm just not seeing it. So I think he's under fire. And even Flashy, you know, so far as a coach the team hasn't looked good enough for me to think that he's had a crazy positive impact. You know, like, who fucking knows with this team though, man? Like, it's just like this organization's fucking cursed. And then Paravision, look, they won 0-3, but they had some tough games against Mouse and Navi in the BO1s. I think they are a team that should have been good enough to beat 3D Max in a BO3, and they did get a map. But hey, I mean, the fact that this team was basically not doing anything on LAN prior to this other than winning that Russian LAN, but the only team they played there was BetBoom that landed a LAN, and then they circled that Star Series. To see them make, you know, it this far, hey, that's a step in the right direction for them. You know, That's all I can really say. Particularly the Zelo guy looks like a prospect. I think it's one of the biggest ones. Even Belch looks okay as well. They could, do a little bit of something to keep this squad together going to next year, but I can certainly see people being interested in Zelo in particular, and maybe try to poach him or something like that. We'll have to see. But anyway, that's going to do it for kind of the Stage 3 recap. Again, be on the lookout for playoff preview videos coming soon, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.